Game Pass is dead. For the last 2 years, I have been saying that Game Pass is dying. There is no future for this. And there were a lot of people who said, no, you clearly don't know anything you're talking about. Mandatory every half-week announcement. Game Pass is doing great. It's making more money than ever, in fact. And here we are now. Xbox is literally crumbling. Xbox Game is a complete disaster, and Game Pass is the most unprofitable thing ever made. Honestly, at this point, Microsoft would be making more money if they completely pivoted all of their gaming assets into a chai latte seed company that was targeting millennial women that worked in the tech industry, and they would be seeing bigger profit margins if they did that. But I mean, that's a wish, but the reality is much more funny, isn't it?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Xbox Game Pass obviously has been the talk of the town these last 7 days or so now. It's been pretty chaotic in the Xbox space. And with that, we have more news. This piece comes from Bloomberg, and it's about why exactly the Game Pass price hike kicked in. It's a lot of what you expect, but now we actually have numbers to work with, and we can go beyond that into just how successful Call of Duty Black Ops 6 was last year, yet that's still the underpinning for why Xbox is making such aggressive changes. So we're
Was Call of Duty 6 successful? I kind of completely spaced out on Call of Duties.
gradually making sense of this whole entire mess. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. If you're new here and you're into what's going on with Microsoft Gaming, consider subscribing. Okay, let's start from the bottom, work our way up. What was the last subscriber count we got for Xbox Game Pass? It was
20 million, I think.
34 million. That was announced in unison with the updates on the Xbox Business podcast episode, where we learned that Microsoft was effectively going multi-platform. Since then, we have not received a single...
By the way, I don't remember when we did it, but we did a little bit of math how absolutely insanely unprofitable Game Pass has to be, right? Because, let me just do some really quick head math so you understand how fucking stupid Game Pass is as a concept, okay? And why obviously stuff like Netflix and Disney are also suffering. Because, think about it. 34 million active subscribers. If we take their price, which is 20 per pop, let's say that they are making 34 times 2. That would be 68. Add a 0. They would be making almost 700 million per month. And you're probably thinking, wow, that... wait, no, it's... yeah, 700 million per month. And you're thinking, wow, that's a lot. Is it, though? Is it? Think about how many AAA games they have to sponsor. Think about the fact that they have multiple people that they need to give a part of this money because they are on Game Pass in the first place. Think about how many assets they have bought with this money, okay? There's so many things that they have to pay for. Let's just look at the AAA gaming industry that they have on Game Pass. Your average AAA game currently is easily in the ballpark of a minimum 500 million to be developed. And Game Pass roughly needs 3 or 4 of them per year to put on their product, otherwise no one's gonna buy them, okay? Game Pass also requires connection costs, stream. There's so much that they have to pay for, right? The people who keep that thing running constantly and so much. But just look at the AAA games that they need to sink in money every single year to make Game Pass at least a little bit interesting for people. It's easily close to 1.5 billion. Okay, and if we're being realistic, probably honestly more close just to the AAA space, closer to something like 2 billion per year. That's if we're being super generous to Game Pass, by the way. That's literally 3 or 4 months of their of all of the money that they have made, literally going to that. And keep in mind, again, that's before costs, and the price that I said, almost 700 million, is before costs. So you need to understand, even if we're just looking at the AAA games that Game Pass needs to subsidize for them to be made in the first place, Game Pass is not making a lot of money. And that's just AAA gaming and being as generous as you can without removing any of their cost margins for operations. That is insanely inefficient.
Xbox Business podcast episode where we learned that Microsoft was effectively going multi-platform. Since then, we have not received a single subscriber count update, and we thought if we were ever going to get one, it would be after the launch of Black Ops 6, especially because some predictions were pretty bullish about what would happen with Game Pass and its growth. For example, GamesIndustry.biz was starting to predict that Game Pass could grow by 2.5 to 4 million subscribers.
LO fucking L, right?
Michael Pachter said it could result in up to 6 million sales lost, pretty close there, but based on the idea that 25% of Game Pass subscribers may have bought the game anyway. However, he adds that the move
25%. This is something that I talked about previously on yesterday's video and before that. I think it's way. I thought it's going to be way worse. And I think I got justified with the news that we have.
could result in 3 to 4 million people signing up to Game Pass, which is good for Microsoft and consumers overall. But the headline will say that Call of Duty sales were down. As we'll get into in a little bit, that ended up not being the case at all. #1 selling game of 2024. And they did that in like, what, a month or so? Meanwhile, Ampere's chief games analyst, Piers Harding Rolls, is a little more conservative and believes that Call of Duty result in a 10% increase in Game Pass Ultimate subs. He also says that not all of those will be completely new users, but rather people upgrading from Core and Standard, the former #1 and 2 tiers, to Ultimate. He feels a good chunk of those new subscribers will come from those tiers. He concludes
Wait, Core and Standard, which are less expensive tiers than $20 as far as I understand. So again, we were very generous when we estimated the almost 700 million per month. You'd think that's a lot, but not really.
suggesting that there's monetization that can help make up the lost sales, which we saw how Call of Duty kind of embarrassed itself over the last year with some of its like crossovers and cosmetics. Like, they monetized that game like they do with every Call of Duty to hell and back. So leading into the launch of Call of Duty Black Ops 6, this was the debate. People were predicting how's it going to affect Xbox Game Pass, how much will it grow versus the sales loss, and should Xbox do it at all? This was after the shock and awe of a multi-platform pivot.
No, we talked about this. The fact that the fact that the Xbox is saying Game Pass is doing good, but they're gonna take the #1 franchise in the world and put it for free on Xbox so people buy it. That's not doing good, okay? That's doing horrible.
And I remember saying, like, I don't think you really can do this. I don't know if it's gonna work out well. And now we have numbers. And so now we dive into the Bloomberg piece about Xbox Game Pass, which says it shows cost of lost Call of Duty sales. The price hike and other changes to Game Pass plans are a sign that Xbox's big streaming push is still not generating the revenue it would like 8 years after launch, according to interviews with 7 current and former Xbox employees. The company is putting some of its top titles on the streaming service, but that's cutting into the sales of higher margin games like Call of Duty, which came with Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard, said the people who asked not to be identified discussing internal company matters. Xbox gave up more than $300 million in sales on Call of Duty on console and PC last year, according to one of the former employees who asked not to be identified discussing internal estimates. Quote, Game Pass hasn't delivered the explosive growth Microsoft anticipated post-Activision. And
wait, to be absolutely fair, you know what's the funny part? Oh, I don't want you to say my name. Bro, if you work in the finance department, you know how little people probably have access to this information. Now, granted, people talk, that's a true thing, but if you want to narrow down who probably started yapping about this shit, keep in mind, in every big company that you work in, anything that you put in, for example, in your Microsoft Access, is tracked. They can see everything that you wanted to find and shit. It is what it is.
They've realized their infrastructure costs don't align with their pricing model, end quote, said Joost van Drunen, founder of the video game analytics firm Aldora. A spokesperson for Xbox declined to comment on the story. So, yeah, $300 million there in sales. Really expected. Like, no one should be surprised that this number is this high. I know this is kind of dirty math, given that like there's different versions of Call of Duty. There was upgrade paths that if you were subscribed to Game Pass, you could buy like a $30 version that would get you in. So roughly we're talking like 4+ million copies sold that they just missed out on. And what we've seen with Xbox is dramatic success going into a third-party publishing role is this full circle moment.
Dramatic success? PlayStation is literally currently getting a lion's share of the Game Pass profits while offering their most shittiest and not exclusive or interesting or beloved titles to Xbox, and Xbox is currently flagging that as a major achievement. My dude, please.
When I talked about in our last video where they're recognizing like, oh, we tried to train people to just play games through a subscription service, lost a lot of money trying to make that subscription service relevant. And the reality is that priority one in a gaming business should be selling the game, not offering a service that rents it. I think that's a good compliment to the business model, and I do appreciate day one games. But the fact that Activision has not delivered explosive growth is perhaps the more concerning part. We saw how much money Xbox spent on Activision to get them in with some of the biggest IP on the planet, including, again, the best-selling game of every year. One of the reasons that I was pretty against the idea of Call of Duty entering Game Pass was simply this. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. But this is what Microsoft does. Think about...
Well, no. That's because Game Pass is broken and no one fucking wants it, and people... Well, not people, but Microsoft is losing money on it. Well, people who buy it also are losing money on it, but still.
What they did with, like, Skype as a great example, right? You buy something that people are enjoying, you gradually water it down, destroy it, the competition beats you out, you give up on it, and you don't blame yourself.
True.
Call of Duty is the top-selling game every year, except when Hogwarts Legacy came out. And if that's, like, your ratio, like, oh, we sometimes are defeated by, like, incredibly popular video games. You have a pretty good thing going for yourself. It's a well-oiled machine. You have 3 developers you rotate through. You have the complete infrastructure of support studios. Like, you have inherited a gold mine. You just don't touch it. You don't tamper with the formula. You look at the income every year and go, oh, Call of Duty, that makes a lot of money, doesn't it? You don't really touch anything, I think. Like, I think of that episode of SpongeBob where Patrick's in the museum touching everything, and the cop's like, don't touch. Like, I was that cop. I was like, Xbox, don't touch. They touch Call of Duty, and as we see here, $300 million in sales lost, which is resulting in the aggressive Game Pass shift. They're losing money, which is what we were all asking since day one games began.
To be fair, yes, they are losing money, but this is a little bit more complicated. You need to understand, because Microsoft didn't just buy Call of Duty. They sadly bought Starfield. Literally $8 billion down the drain. Then they acquired World of Warcraft, slowly failing title that is literally dying the death of apathy, which is complete disaster if you're in the game industry. And they bought Diablo 4. Yeah, none of these things made a single buckaroony. And Microsoft needs these things somehow to actually get a return on investment. So if Call of Duty is doing good or bad, it doesn't matter. They're just gonna push the thing that's most likely to at least get some money back from them. Otherwise, it's like, holy shit, did we just spend 80 billion on nothing? Did we just burn $80 billion for absolutely nothing? Yes. Yes, you did, by the way. Yes, you did indeed. That's a great buy.
Game of thing. As I've said many times, I'll always ride the day one Game Pass train because I thought it was awesome. I still think, minus the $30 a month thing, it is still awesome, right? I love that Xbox went for it. But I also said many times on Defining Duke, like, they're...
What's the point? You can literally buy a AAA game for $30 a month almost every 2 or 3 months, depending on the game. Why would you rent if you can now buy one AAA game every 2 to 3 months? And AAA games don't even come out that often. Like, the $30 price hike, which by the way I predicted because I said, hey, there's only two ways to grow Game Pass, and well, the first one, aka get new people on it, is not working out. So they're gonna do the second one really soon. It hasn't been even, by the way, half a year since I made that prediction, and here we are because they have no other choice as a business.
Could be a point this runs out, so enjoy the ride while it lasts. Here's the interesting thing though. This article frames it in a way where it's like Call of Duty failed because of Game Pass. We don't know that for sure, and it's really hard to argue it failed when you look at some of the things that not only Microsoft is saying, but just raw sales numbers and statistics here. Okay, let's start off with this one. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 was marked as the biggest Call of Duty launch ever, and sets a new single-day Game Pass sub record. Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella says Call of Duty Black Ops 6 was the biggest Call of Duty release ever, setting new day one and opening weekend records as sales on PlayStation and Steam jumped 60% compared to Modern Warfare 3 in 2023, which, hey, let me just pause for a second here. That's not saying much. That game was awful, but let's continue on. Game Pass also...
Was Modern Warfare 3 the one with the, World War... No, it's called Modern Warfare. It can't be. I think that was Battlefield 5, right? In any case, Modern Warfare 3 was also atrocious, was it not?
Benefited from Call of Duty's release, setting a new record for the amount of new subscribers in a single day. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 launch last week saw stronger concurrence on Steam that outperformed Modern Warfare 2 and 3. This makes sense. Black Ops 6 was a really strong Call of Duty entry. They overhauled the movement, campaign was great, multiplayer was pretty solid, zombies was solid. Like, it just hit all the marks. Like, Xbox had kind of the perfect game to do the test within. Like, this is Call of Duty at its best. It's most fresh, it's most new, but also true to itself. Like, everyone was on board. Positivity for the game was really strong, unlike this year's Call of Duty, where it would be, I guess, a less favorable sample size. And so the results were there. Best player count in Call of Duty history ever. Even if Xbox isn't giving us numbers on that, we know the numbers Call of Duty puts up is astronomical. So having the best Call of Duty launch ever, even if it is just accounting for overall players, is still pretty substantial in my opinion. But we'll get into, I think, more money-focused stats in a second here. But what we got here is Nadella announcing the results during today's Microsoft...
Wait, I don't understand what exactly Maddie's point is about this, honestly.
Earnings, which as usual focused heavily on the company...
He's kind of saying Call of Duty did better than Call of Duty 6 did better than people anticipated, so it's fine.
These AI and cloud-based initiatives, according to Microsoft, Activision Blizzard helped drive a 43% rise in gaming revenue, while Xbox content and services grew 61%, which would include something like Game Pass. Meanwhile, as we can see, the tail of the tape, hardware dropped 29% at the time of Black Ops 6 launch.
By the way, again, remember, these numbers don't mean anything, okay? For example, if you're a retail sales place, like, for example, GameStop, and, well, obviously you're failing, your revenue is fucking down in the bucket, you can probably get your servers growth up by 60%, if you want to call it that, just by starting to sell fucking cigarettes and matches in your stores. That's it. Your service is gonna grow by X because, you're selling small things that people buy often, and you're not gonna get people, but that doesn't mean that your revenue is going down or whatever. And saying Activision Blizzard helped drive a 43% rise in gaming revenue is, by the way, a disaster. Because how fucking bad was the revenue in Xbox gaming before Activision? If just Activision drives it up by 43%, like, how bad were things really if just buying Activision, a company that's honestly worth like 1/25 of what Microsoft is worth? I'm probably way off on that, but just to get a generalization feeling for how fucking shit Activision Blizzard is compared to a juggernaut like Microsoft. And you're saying a company that's not worth even pennies compared to what Microsoft in general is drove their revenue by 40 fucking 3%. How poorly was Xbox performing in that case? Like, Jesus.
Launch. So what we've got here is Call of Duty lost 300 million in sales, but there's Microsoft out there saying like, hey, best Call of Duty launch ever. It's doing really good for us. And sales don't lie. You look at the December sales, Call of Duty led.
You know what else doesn't lie? My hips don't lie. I don't remember the Shakir song, but you get the point.
The charge. Not only that, but according to Matt Piscatella, Call of Duty Black Ops 6 finished as both the best-selling premium video game of December and the 2024 year. Call of Duty.
I mean, and everyone knows that Call of Duty sells a lot. It's literally called the most popular selling game in the world. We know. We know.
Was the best-selling video game franchise in the United States. Full game dollar sales.
Keep in mind, Call of Duty, when they released that really shitty Call of Duty, right? I don't remember which one it was, but it was still the best-selling game of the year, even though it sold 25% less than the previous title. Call of Duty is just giant, okay? So being the best-selling game of the year doesn't actually mean that you're necessarily doing perfectly. Because you can still be the worst selling Call of Duty game in a fucking decade, but you can still be the most selling game in a year.
Excluding add-on content for a record 16th consecutive year. So in a year where Call of Duty lost $300 million in sales, it was still the best-selling video game of the year while on Game Pass, and resulted in the biggest single-day growth, which, by the way, the last time we heard that statement was when Starfield came out.
Okay, I'm having a feeling that I understand Maddie's point, which is, well, it's Call of Duty is like a big franchise, so it's all good. That seems kind of the point here, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, that was Mr. Maddie Plays, 10 out of 10. Xbox is dying, 10 out of 10, bye!